Hello.
You ready to go?
Yes, I'm in an area with much better service.
Okay, there you are, yeah. Set dropped here, okay. Are you still contributing to Complex?
I write for them on a freelance basis.
Okay.
So from time to time I'm still there, but I'm not,
Okay, no, we're going to go on here. So, okay. Tri-City Sports Now yesterday. Drew Brees passed Peyton Manning as the all-time leading passer in the NFL in terms of career yards. He did in the 5th game of the season, like I told you he was going to do months ahead of time. I said, watch out for that. And it did. And it occurred just the way I thought it would. So now the question is out. Is Drew Brees better than Peyton Manning? Chris Gaine is a contributor for Complex Sports. Last year, he wrote a story suggesting that Drew Brees is not just the greatest quarterback from Purdue and not just the greatest quarterback to ever play for the New Orleans Saints, but maybe the greatest of all time. Chris Gaine joined me now. Chris, well, tell us, why is Drew Brees the greatest quarterback of all time?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, Marky. Then the stats really don't lie. Drew Brees has the most yards, most completions, and best completion percentage of any quarterback who's ever played. He's now the all-time leading passer, as we saw last night. He's not far behind in touchdowns. He's one away from 500. When he gets that, he'll be only the 4th player ever with 500 touchdowns. He's about 38, 39 behind Peyton Manning. Then far two, you could see Brady and Drew Brees going back and forth for the all-time record. And then when you look at what Brees has done with far inferior teams than what Brady's to a team in the a lot of people would slight him in that he hasn't won as much in the playoffs as Brady's had, but he's done it with far inferior teams. The idea of the Saints winning the Super Bowl about 15 years ago is pretty much unfathomable. They were the Aints. They were the worst team in football. But Brees has brought him back, and he's really solidified himself as one of the all-time greats, both statistically and with what he's done to that city.
Well, Chris Gaine, I can't disagree with anything. In fact, you just won in my monologue to begin the show. What you'll be able to read on Medium here in a short period of time, and also just listen to on archives on Facebook, on my own personal Facebook page, just what I had to say of Brees against Manning. But what I was kind of intrigued by was just how similar the statistics were between Manning and Brees, but also you mentioned the legacy. I mean, yeah, you mentioned the Aints. Now to call New Orleans the Aints would be Steelers. I mean, it's just, we don't even think that Peyton Manning had a similar impact with the Indianapolis Colts, who I always thought were this dreadful team with a dreadful owner who didn't care about the fans because he moved them from Baltimore, and I remember that and how a sour taste that was. I remember the Indianapolis Colts draft always seemed to have the first pick in the NFL draft. They were horrible, and in fact, they never won 10 regular season games in a year. They won 10 or more games. But now without them, last 4 years, non-winning records, looks like same old Ursays, if you will, even with Andrew Luck. You mentioned the career numbers, but because they're so comparable, are they more comparable QBs in your opinion?
Well, they're both on the same sort of level, but I think where Brees kind of pulls away from Manning is that he's lasting a year. He faded hard, and we'll see what happens with Brees, but there's no signs of that yet. The Saints are on pace for his 13,000-yard season. He's at 12 now. Before that, Dan Marino had the record at 7, so he's almost doubled him. And, I mean, you look at some of his individual years, there's only been 9 5,000-yard seasons in the entire history of the NFL. Peyton's got 1, Brady's got 1, Marino's got 1, Matt Stafford also has 1. Brees has 5, so I think to separate himself from the pack is just the continuity he's had. And it's very late in his career. Brees is in his late 30s now, 39 years old. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we'll see how much longer he can continue it, but he's not really showing any signs of slowing down right now.
Well, I'm not here to not ask this. You're talking about the GOAT, the greatest of all, bigger and stronger, but they also have tremendous rules advantages today to protect the passer from being hit, to even the bump and run rules, which allow you to basically be, in a previous era, completing 50% of your passes. That was kind of the mark. Now it's got to be 60% because greatest of all time. Should we have more reverence for even the Sammy Baws and Otto Graham and Roger Staubachs, because they had to play against rules that really were prohibitive to the passer, unlike now, which are very supportive to the passer?
Yeah, I think that's something you should definitely take into consideration. Obviously, stat line is stat line. Joe Namath, they're not as impressive as you see from contemporary guys who obviously do have those rules advantages. But you just look at the impact that Brees has had on the organization. That's kind of something that you can look at that's pretty consistent over periods of time, the impact a quarterback has on his organization. Like I said before, the Saints, 39 years before Brees, 5 playoff. You look back at the time he signed there, no one, even the Browns, wanted Brees. And he completely changed that franchise single-handedly. The day he retires, there'll be a well-deserved statue for him out by that Superdome, and he is the face of that franchise. He is to that franchise. He is to that city what Michael Jordan was to Chicago, especially lifting them up after Hurricane Katrina. He brought them up when they needed no New Orleans and Brees, and that's something you can look at.
Yeah, I think you're there.
On any city.
I don't disagree with you whatsoever. And like I said, the stat that I came up with was the Saints had never played in a conference championship game before Drew Brees. He goes in, I believe, takes a 3-13 team, doesn't he? And then goes to the NFC Championship game and is very in Soldier Field. It's kind of forgotten there. And then the Bears go on to lose to Peyton Manning and such. But I do want to ask, but like I said, I kind of think Manning had the same impact with an equally woeful franchise in the Indianapolis Colts. Perhaps, because I do separate Indianapolis, that they are, I always thought franchise relocation, let alone changing the fan base, there is something to be said for having the Unitas statue in Baltimore, or for that matter, the George Sisler statue in St. Louis, that sort of thing. Where I'm going to go with, though, is and ask you about the Brees versus Manning comparison. What kind of weight do you put that Brees defeated Manning in Super Bowl Manning's play?
Yeah, and another thing between Brees and Manning, where you could say maybe Manning did a little bit better, is that he had, he was in the playoffs basically every year. There were hardly ever years where Manning wasn't in the playoffs with Indy. But, even in the years Brees wasn't in the playoffs, he really just had all-time great years in spite of some pretty awful defenses. The Saints, since he's been there 12 full years, they've only the bottom. And then, from 2012 to 2016, the Saints were pretty bad. Brees was only 39 and 40, but that wasn't because of him. He averaged over 5,000 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 5 picks during that 5-year stretch. That'd be considered an all-time great stretch for any player in any era. And, he got penalized because he was on such an awful team. And that's another thing that really speaks to Brees' greatness. He didn't have the I'm taking my talents to South Beach attitude. He could have just, this past year, he's a free agent, he could have said, you know what, New Orleans, you guys are great, but I'm going to go to Jacksonville and win a Super Bowl. And if he went to Jacksonville, they probably never went to that city. Really speaks volumes about him, and really shouldn't count against his greatness because, you could say Brady's got 5 rings, Manning's got 2, Brees only has 1, and yeah, the ring should count, but Brees has 1, so does Trent Dilfer. No one would argue that Brees is on par with Trent Dilfer just because he only has 1 ring. So, I think that's really somewhere where what he's continuing to do because he's still at 39 years old. Arguably the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, I could see that.
Years. Brees has almost 5,000 more passing yards than Brady in actually 3 fewer games. So, I think that's something that should at least count in Brees' favor. He doesn't have the rings. He doesn't have the organization. He didn't have the benefit of playing for the best coach in the history So, I mean, I think you could definitely make the case just on ability alone that Marino was better than Elway. I mean, he did retire as the best statistical quarterback in NFL history.
Well, I would agree with you there. Of course, I'm the Marino fan, but I will tell you this. If it's stats, it's Marino. If it's rings, it's Elway. Very similar.